Every so often, newspapers report the story of a pastor who draws inspiration from Jesus' parable about the talents, found in the synoptic tradition, a Q tradition, Matthew chapter 25, verses 14 to 20, which we read over the weekend, and Luke chapter 19, verses 11 to 27. The pastor entrusts each family or head of household in the parish or church or megachurch with $10 and exhorts them to work with it and awaits the result after a specified amount of time. This is considered living a virtuous life, right? Some do fantastically well and return a large amount to the church. A few keep the money with no intention of returning it. But the results always please the pastor because the return is always larger than the sum distributed. The pastor then sings the praises of the industrious members of his congregation or her congregation for their gospel-inspired behavior. Could the same person who said, quote, "Lend, expecting nothing in return, and your reward will be great, and you will be the sons of the Most High," Luke chapter 6, verse 36, make an about-face on another occasion and praise in parable those who lent with the deliberate intention of gaining interest?
Probably not.
Something's wrong here. Something's off here. Little bells should be going off in your head. Ding, 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 ding. Something's off. You know, our world is very different than the ancient Mediterranean Israelite world of Jesus. Parables represent the typical Middle Eastern cultural practice of saying one thing but meaning another. Western listeners or readers must have to keep that, foremost in their mind when they read or hear a parable at Mass. I got to tell you folks, this parable is not about lending money and gaining interest, or its spiritual equivalent. But how can we know that for certain? We can know for certain that this parable cannot be about lending money and gaining interest because such a practice was considered stealing and sinful. Exodus chapter 22, verse 25. If you take your neighbor's cloak as a pledge, you shall return it to him before sunset. It is forbidden by Torah to lend money and gain interest, except when you deal with foreigners. Deuteronomy chapter 23, verse 20 to 21. You shall not demand interest from your kindred on a loan of money or of food or of anything else which is loaned. From a foreigner you may demand interest, but you may not demand interest from your kindred, so that Yahweh your God may bless you in all your undertakings on the land you are to enter and possess. That's from Moses, according to Israelite tradition. So I have to ask, what is this parable about really? The parable, in its present form, as found in Matthew and Luke, is about God and how God interacts with human beings. However, the parable presents a snapshot of some event or behavior set in the Middle Eastern world. Understanding that setting is central to interpreting the parable correctly. All scholars agree that the parable, as it appears in Matthew and as it appears in Luke, has been heavily edited. Indeed, the version in Luke has allegorizing verses. Luke turns the parable into an allegory about what do you do while you wait for the parousia, Jesus' royal return to establish theocracy. So we have to ask, what might the pre-Paschal Jesus original parable, stage 1, have sounded like? Is it possible to recover this story in its stage 1 original form? Context, context, context. Whether it's words or sentences, folks, language only means what it means, where and when you use it. This causes us a huge problem when it comes to the parables of Jesus as given in the Gospels, and then as interpreted again and again throughout church history. Like, for example, at Mass on Sunday. When we begin to talk about the teachings of Jesus, including his parables, we have a context problem, don't we?